California News.
KCAA.
Are you ready for a new experience? To see life from another point of view? New hope, new expression, new joy. This is your radio hour. Welcome to Viewpoint with Father John.
And welcome, friends. You're tuned to NBC Radio, KCAA, 1050 AM, 102.3 FM, 106.5 FM, or you can listen from anywhere in the world at kcaaradio.com. This is Viewpoint with Father John. I am your host, Father John Reed. By the way, you can follow us on Facebook and Instagram. Just look for Viewpoint with Father John. And if you miss a show, all of our shows go on YouTube. In the search bar, just put Viewpoint with Father John, KCAA, and you'll get all of the last 3.5 years worth of all of our tapings. Losing my brainwave there. Also, speaking of loss of brainwave, you can also follow me on Twitter at Father John Reed. Yeah, Father is spelled out, and Reed is the appropriate Irish R-E-I-D. Anything less would be uncivilized. All of God's children are endowed with extraordinary purpose and ability. I'm on a quest to help as many as possible in fully realizing their divinely inspired potential. Disposing of false narrative and embracing genuineness inspires clarity of purpose. My role is to help overcome self-imposed limitations in realizing one's spiritual potential. And folks, I'd like to tell you about the best pharmacy that is in Southern California. That's Claremont Pharmacy, located on the corner of Indian Hill Boulevard and Arrow Highway in the city of Claremont. It is owned by Dr. Nikki Ho, who is a dear friend of mine. I just saw her today as I was picking up some of my diabetic medication. But if you really want to be treated like a person and not a number, go to Claremont Pharmacy. Tell them I said hello. And also, if you still need to get vaccinated, which I highly encourage you to do, you can get vaccinated there. She has both the Moderna and the Johnson & Johnson vaccines. And remember, folks, that doesn't cost you anything to get vaccinated, but it may save everything around you, including people you love. So please do it. Also, you're looking for a good DJ service? Lakeside DJ Services by none other than Frank, our sound engineer, who's running the board right there. And he also has a photo booth with this, and that's a lot of fun. So give him a try. He's at LakesideDJServices.com, and he'll really help you, and he's always fair on his price. So way to go. Also, as some of you can see, I got my hair cut today. That was done at Uppercuts in Pomona. It's BYOG, bring your own gun. I'm just kidding, because it's in Pomona. But Sam cut my hair again today, and I thank you, Sam, for that. He's a great barber. For those of you watching on YouTube, you can see their information there. And when you go there, tell them I said hello. They'll cut your hair a little shorter for you. So anyhow, we're having a little bit too much fun tonight. Tonight, my guest is someone I have great respect for. And we're going to talk about an issue that normally doesn't get covered on this show, but I think with what we're going through as a nation, I would be remiss if we didn't cover this because it's really important. And so my guest is Professor Vanessa Tyson. She's associate professor in politics at Scripps College at the Women's College of Claremont. And now that I'm stuttered all through that, I don't know what's going on with the stuttering. I think I'm getting ready for the retreat I'm doing this weekend, and I think my vocal cords are already on retreat. So, Professor, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. It's great to hear your voice, Father John.
Well, it's great to hear you, too, and I appreciate you being on the show. You were on the show before and did a great job. And when I first met you was with our friend Joe Salas, and you shared some things that really moved me deeply about things you were doing when you were in college, the real life-changing things for people, such as instead of food being thrown out, being able to use for homeless people, for mulch, for all kinds of stuff. And so immediately I was really impressed with you. And then the more you spoke, the more impressed I became. And you had a real clarity in your thought and in where you were headed with things. And that's why I wanted to speak with you tonight about a real touchy issue. So I want to talk to someone who has great integrity, which you are, about this issue, which is the fact that some tremendous changes are happening in our political world. This is not the parties we knew 30, 40 years ago, particularly the GOP. I don't recognize anything there, and I'm an independent before someone starts throwing darts. I'm an independent, but I'm seeing things I can't recognize. You know, I've worked with people on both sides of the aisle forever, especially when I worked labor issues. And we always could hear each other's points of view. Neither of us yelled at each other. I mean, we would have some heated discussions, but we'd go to lunch afterwards and we loved each other. Something's changed. And can you give a little insight to what you're seeing has changed, or is that just my perception?
I think you're dead on in terms of the dynamics and the tone, the tenor of politics, you know, locally, you know, statewide and nationally. And it's highly disconcerting for me as a political scientist, right? You know, there's a certain amount that we political scientists try to predict. You know, this is part of our job, and yet we've seen kind of certain dynamics of social fabric of society kind of dwindle away. And so I definitely want to talk about this because I think there's, you know, some underlying history that we saw, particularly in the Clinton years, right, from 1992 to 2000. And then, you know, we really saw it, you know, kind of explode after President Barack Obama was elected.
Yes.
And so I want to offer you like a bit of trajectory, like kind of a bit of history here on certain dynamics that took place in the Clinton years, as well as, you know, what we're seeing today.
Great.
You know, back in 1993, when Bill Clinton was inaugurated, you know, Newt Gingrich was at that point head of the House of Representatives. He was Speaker of the House, and you know, his approach had always been largely combative. You know, he was known prior to Clinton's election even for, you know, making incendiary speeches on the House floor that he could then, you know, broadcast to, you know, the people across the country, hometown, district, etc. When actually nobody was there or even listening.
Right.
This was a pattern of his behavior. But I think what we saw in the early 90s was this undertone, right? This kind of this kind of non-statesmanship, if you will.
Yeah, well, even his fellow Republicans didn't like him or his approach, and many of them wanted to do away with him. They saw him as a troublemaker. I remember reading some of the history on that because they thought, one, he was vulgar, and I'm taking it from their words.
Yes. And
he didn't believe in working with people. I mean, if you can't get along with Tip O'Neill, you can't get along with anybody. So yeah, I'm sorry I interrupted you.
No, I completely agree. You know, you and I are, you know, in the same boat. At any rate, I was almost going to say of the same cloth, but then I realized.
Nice.
Maybe not quite.
Good play.
So that said, right? So you have this very combative Speaker of the House who was determined to undermine, you know, whatever Bill Clinton's agenda was, regardless of whether or not it was actually good for, you know, the American people. And so, in so doing, you see kind of a rise much more of demagoguery than compromise, while you also see, you know, a prioritization of ego and party over the American people. In my opinion, but I, you know, am kind of an expert. Here's the deal.
Not kind of, you are an expert.
You know, yeah. So you deal with that for the next 8 years, and I am not endorsing former President Bill Clinton in any way, shape, or form. Just to be clear, I'm not. But that said, what you saw was the derailing of policy agendas, as in large part due to ego and demagoguery, like kind of cult of personality. Now, this kind of sows the seed for what we've seen in the past decade. Where Mitch McConnell, who could easily be called the obstructor in chief, was determined to make President Obama a one-term president. Now that was not the case, but nonetheless, the strategy very much was that Barack Obama could not have any policy wins. Right. This, didn't matter if it was good for the American people. Didn't matter if, it would help, potentially save lives. It only mattered that it was, that Barack Obama's demise was kind of primary importance.
Right.
So you also see the rise of the Tea Party, and this slogan about taking our country back, and I'm like, back from who?
Exactly.
Who took it? Right? Like last time I checked, we were all residing in the United States.
Well,
right? We're all Americans. Like, who took it? Nobody took it. You just didn't win.
Well, when they
this Take America Back, morphed over time into Make America Great Again.
Yeah, and there's another thing that went along with that I saw as a priest, and that is the evangelicals got on with that, saying taking Christmas back when Christmas was never taken away, and saying, they're trying to take Christmas from us, and, how dare them say Happy Holidays instead of Merry Christmas, and some of these twerps who get themselves on film at Starbucks, and they write their name Merry Christmas, so they have to say Merry Christmas, and it's like, we're not the only religion here. They didn't try to take it from us. We're trying to take their religion from them. So.
Exactly. Like there can't be a kind of dominance, and really a non-recognition of all other groups, and then claim that you're the victim in the situation.
Right.
Which, isn't unheard of both in the United States and around the world. But nonetheless, this kind of this approach where there's a lack of perspective and a lack of willingness to understand a plurality where people of different faiths, of different races, of different ethnicities, of different, all sorts of backgrounds and orientations and identities, etc., should be allowed to coexist peacefully without being transgressed upon.
Right.
So what we saw, particularly, with the rise of former President Donald Trump as a candidate in 2015, was a willingness to kind of create an us versus them dynamic, and them happened to be anybody who, his first speech as a candidate was referring to Mexican immigrants as drug dealers and rapists.
Right.
That his tone as well as his rhetoric suggested that that these people, whoever they were, are infiltrating, right? And we need to make America great again. Now, understanding the appeal, right? This is a very nationalistic appeal that was, seen as, popular regardless of, popular amongst certain groups regardless of socioeconomic status.
Right.
It's still, so basically, watered the seeds that were already there, that had been planted for a long time, in terms of what was appropriate to say and inappropriate to say about those who were considered other.
Yes.
And in so doing, it became this very, violent, in a way, kind of approach to the understanding of difference.
Right.
Right? Like, look, most of my friends are different from me, right? In one way or another. They're very different from me. We can talk about all the different ways that they're different. But one thing that I can say, and is that, that in many cases it's that difference that I appreciate, in part because they help me to grow and they help me to learn, and and hopefully I become a better person, and I hope it's also like mutual.
Yes.
But Trump seemed to appeal to kind of an ignorance, a brazen ignorance, and which ultimately proved deadly.
Yes.
By the time we reached the 2020 election, and this is why, and you and I have talked about this before, why I so strongly support getting vaccinated, why I so strongly supported, understanding that no, COVID is not a hoax.
Right.
People are dying. You don't have, we've had well over 600,000 Americans die.
Yes.
Right? This is far more than how many died on 9/11, right? This is more than how many died during Vietnam. And yet you have so many people who are not taking it seriously, who refuse to believe in science. And case in point, I was talking with one of my neighbors down the street. We were talking about the fact that, the misinformation about, that the vaccine, that people were installing trackers.
Right.
That the vaccine somehow was a tracker. And I'm like, but they're using this, they're saying this, using a cell phone.
Yes.
Which is basically the ultimate tracker you can have.
Well, real quick, because what you're talking about is very important, but Frank's looking at me through the glass. If I don't go to commercial, I'm going to experience violence right here. So we'll be back in 90 seconds. You're listening to Viewpoint with Father John.
The loss of a loved one is one of the most challenging experiences in a person's life. It's hard to know where to turn to make your loved one's final arrangements. Jesse Ruiz at Personal Funeral Planning in Ontario will treat you and your loved one with the respect you deserve. Jesse served in the Marine Corps in Desert Storm and understands what it takes to provide loyal, personalized, and empathetic service to those who need it most. The families of Michael Jackson, Brittany Murphy, Ed McMahon, and many others have trusted Jesse to provide them with the highest level of service and support. To work with Jesse, call 909-762-4027, 909-762-4027, or visit their website, www.4pfp.org. www.4pfp as in personalfuneralplanning.org. Jesse Ruiz and Personal Funeral Planning, veteran owned and operated, helping you plan a personal, lasting tribute for your loved one. www.4pfp.org.
It's time to shop in the cool, relaxed comfort of the Tri-City Shopping Center in Redlands, conveniently located on the I-10 freeway between the Alabama and Tennessee exits. Bring the kids too and watch them play in the only indoor fun center, High Five Indoor Playground, where parents are welcomed on the playground. Birthday celebrations are encouraged, so make plans for some great fun at the mall. More reasons why the Tri-City Center is called the Mall with a Heart.
And welcome back, friends. You're tuned to NBC Radio, KCAA, 1050 AM, 102.3 FM, 106.5 FM, or you can listen from anywhere around the world at kcaaradio.com. This is Viewpoint with Father John. I am your host, Father John Reed. And a quick shout out to Frank. Thank you for all you're doing, buddy. Glad you have you in there and doing all this great stuff you're doing with music these days. And my guest this evening is Professor Vanessa Tyson. I don't know why I'm stuttering when I say your name tonight. I guess I get excited. She's Associate Professor of Politics at Scripps College, the Women's College of Claremont, as we call it, Harvard West. So I'm sorry I had to interrupt you during that, because you're talking about some very important points, and particularly the draw of some people to this. And just to throw in there real quick, and then I'll have you continue commenting. This us and them attitude. I have two neighbors down the street from me that are still flying Trump flags, one with the American flag upside down. But he changed that out, and I saw it for the first time today, and I'll be honest, it sent chills down my spine. He replaced the flag with a flag that has red and white stripes with a snake on it. It says, "Join or die." And these are people, one of them is retired from Army, which really gets me because I was in the Army. But this is really dangerous stuff. This isn't just a difference of opinion. This is really a difference of reality and of a violent movement as I see it. Is that what you're seeing as well, or am I seeing something different?
No, that seems to very accurately kind of capture what I'm seeing as well. I was talking with a very wise friend of mine earlier today who, I just love to pieces. She's former faculty at Stanford Medical School, and we were talking about the dynamics related, for instance, to the number of COVID deaths. And one thing that she brought up was that, and even in understanding this divide, and we're seeing it not only as a political divide between kind of those who support Trump versus those who don't disproportionately, not necessarily Biden supporters, but kind of like a lot of people who don't support Trump.
Right.
And this kind of sociological divide and socio-medical divide between those who believe they should get the vaccine and those who aren't. And one of the things that she talked about personally that I thought was very interesting was the idea of deprivation, right? And this understanding that the people who are rejecting the vaccine have been, in many ways, deprived, throughout their lifetimes of necessarily the kind of judgment, the kind of knowledge that comes with understanding the importance of a vaccine.
Right.
We were able to, essentially rid ourselves of polio, not because, of anti-vaxxers, but because the government did everything it could in its power to make sure that people were vaccinated, and that we would no longer that individuals would no longer deal with polio in this country. I think, and so she framed it in terms of deprivation. Deprivation of awareness, deprivation of knowledge, deprivation of scientific information, she was like, so many people are dying, right? And whether or not you're getting the vaccine, you shouldn't have to die.
Right.
And this comes from her medical background, right? Not only do no harm, but save lives, save as many lives as possible.
Right.
And as a consequence, right? Like this is, perhaps in some ways they've been deprived of a sense of community and connection where my life is tied to all those around me, right? And we're all tied to each other,
Yes.
right? So this is not simply about the government telling you what to do or what not to do. It's about prioritizing the collective good
Yes.
and prioritizing humanity over over your own individual preference.
Exactly.
Um,
In fact, one of the things that's gotten thrown in there, and I guess I'm handling the religious end of this since I'm the priest here, is that the way that some evangelical churches have taken this on, that if you get vaccinated, it means you don't have enough faith in Jesus. And now, when I say it, I can hear the insanity of that, but there are those people who really believe that. And when this first started happening, and some of the mega churches were insisting that their congregations show up in person at these mega churches, which were mega super spreaders.
yep.
CNN was doing a thing on it, and one of the pastors had pulled up, and the reporter didn't know he was a pastor, and he says, he's asking, what do you think about all this? He says, well, I know all my people are well because I'm the pastor, and if you say anything bad about me, I have lawyers that will sue you. And I'm thinking, well, first of all, that goes against Jesus suing people. And here's all these people being told, you just have to have faith in Jesus and you won't get this. And then many people from that parish, from that church, died of COVID.
Mm-hmm.
And I haven't seen any of these clergy repentant on leading these people not just to the edge, but over the cliff with COVID so that they can make a couple of dollars. And I'm sorry, that's what it comes down to. If they're not in the pews, you're not making the money. And we used to jokingly call it fleecing the flock. And,
Wow.
And, because they could have done all that through multimedia. They have all kinds of media stuff. But you collect more money when they're in the pews. And I'm sorry, that's really what it's about. So you have people dying from someone that they trust, their pastor. And this is happening from politicians as well. I mean, we're having that problem with Fox News. Now, Sean Hannity has now gone to saying you should take the vaccine because the Biden administration got a hold of Fox and started talking to him about liabilities. You're killing people. And
Yeah.
so I'm sorry I took that side route, but I wanted to get that in work because I think you're going a little bit that direction, if I'm hearing you correctly.
Yes. And all of these lives are so incredibly important. I mean, this is the thing. I don't, whether or not you want to get the vaccine, the reality is, you may contract this virus and give it to someone you love who passes away. You may contract this virus and give it to your spouse, to your child. I mean, we have all these, kids under 12 who don't have a vaccine yet.
Yes.
And when you think about it, it's, to me, not getting the vaccine is negligent, right? Because it's not simply about you, it's about everyone around you. It's about trying to keep your family, keep your neighbors, keep your community healthy.
Yes.
And what I would also say is that, if you want to take the religious route, I would like to think that God gave us brains so that we could use them.
Yes, I would agree.
And in so doing, right, it would mean, take some science classes.
Yes.
Learn about viruses. Do the research or at least read the research because there's so much out there.
Or at least
that
take a
suggests
health
that
class.
This vaccine will save your life or will save the lives of the people you love.
Well, yeah.
And at the end of the day,
Go ahead.
love has to drive us. Not fear, love.
Absolutely. And what we're seeing, and many are calling it now, the disease of the unvaccinated, the epidemic of the unvaccinated, because
Surge of,
the people who are dying, 99.5%, now this is scientifically proven, 99.5 of the people dying are people who are unvaccinated. And I've heard physicians sharing with me that they'll have a patient that's getting ready to be put on a ventilator and begging for the vaccine, and they're telling them it's too late.
It is. It is. You can't, once you're about to be intubated, that's not the time to have a change of heart, right? You don't want it to be too late.
Yeah, and I've had I did a funeral a few months back where this was the second person of that family that I did a funeral for. Both had died from COVID. And at the funeral director and I were the only one who showed up wearing masks. And they went way past the numbers we're supposed to have. Okay. And they could not be convinced, even though we just buried two members of their family a month apart, they still believe that COVID is a hoax. And
that's heartbreaking.
And it's a public health issue that certain media is propagating, and I think should be legally held accountable for it. That is homicide as far as I'm concerned. And I think I have a case. I'm not a lawyer, but I've talked to a friend of mine who's a prosecutor, and he says there would be a real case for that.
I mean, it's criminal negligence. That's a result. I mean,
Yes.
like, there's a part of me that's like, okay, is it homicide or is it manslaughter, right? So you'll have to forgive me.
No, that's fine.
In terms of like what it would count as, right? And yet, with losing so many lives, it seems to be willful ignorance. Also, willful ignorance that individuals are willing to pass on to their children, to pass on, to the elderly, that you have so many different groups that are at risk, at higher risk, if you will.
Yes.
And this willful ignorance it's not only that these individuals, these adults who choose not to get vaccinated are deprived, it's that they are kind of creating a multi-generational deprivation of knowledge.
Yes.
Right? And then multi-generational deprivation of science and reason.
Yes.
And this is, it's almost like it's one thing for you to believe what you believe, but it's another thing to indoctrinate others in such a way that they are willing to engage in this criminal negligence.
Yes.
Because they've been told that they're right and no one else is.
And that's, I think, hitting the nail on the head. It's not about what's right. It's about how can I prove I'm right even when I'm wrong. And it's about going after power, not serving people. And I think that's the biggest change I've seen in our political system, is it going from wanting to do something that's good for the people to trying to go absolutely about power. One of the things Newt Gingrich brought into this in the study I've done, and you're far more qualified than I am, is that his policy was, and you mentioned it a little bit, no matter what, make the other guy look bad, even if it costs us, because we're going to get power out of it. And Stephen Kornacki wrote a book, The Red and the Blue.
Oh, yeah.
And even this dyslexic boy read the whole book, that was a real trick for a dyslexic. But the information I found to be really accurate with what I had studied before. I don't know if you've read the book or not, or acquainted with it.
I'm sure I have it on a bookcase somewhere in the house. I've been a little preoccupied.
No, I get it. But what I saw is this in this, and that's why I'm bringing it up, is this new form of politics was so foreign to so many people in the Senate. And Ted Kennedy's autobiography, I think it's autobiography, it's been a while, I'm getting old. He had written how in his early days, he would pull up in his car in front of the Capitol, and he'd get all warm inside saying, I get to work here. And he and other members of Congress in the Senate would get together and they would argue like mad, and then afterwards go to drinks afterwards, and then they'd do their compromising. But they reached out and spoke with each other, and both were interested in finding what would work best for the people. And so they both gave a little, they both received a little, and they worked because they really did care. And he wrote in his book, that's all changed now. Now it's the loneliest place in the world because nobody talks anymore. They just insult each other. And you can't show any weakness. Speaking of weakness, I have to go to my next commercial break. Otherwise, Frank's going to say he's going to hit me with something that'll leave me weak the rest of the week. So you're listening to Viewpoint with Father John, and we'll be back in 90 seconds.
The loss of a loved one is one of the most challenging experiences in a person's life. It's hard to know where to turn to make your loved one's final arrangements. Jesse Ruiz at Personal Funeral Planning in Ontario will treat you and your loved one with the respect you deserve. Jesse served in the Marine Corps in Desert Storm and understands what it takes to provide loyal, personalized, and empathetic service to those who need it most. The families of Michael Jackson, Brittany Murphy, Ed McMahon, and many others have trusted Jesse to provide them with the highest level of service and support. To work with Jesse, call 909-762-4027, 909-762-4027, or visit their website, www.4pfp.org, www.4pfp as in personalfuneralplanning.org. Jesse Ruiz and Personal Funeral Planning, veteran-owned and operated, helping you plan a personal, lasting tribute for your loved one. www.4pfp.org.
It's time to shop in the cool, relaxed comfort of the Tri-City Shopping Center in Redlands, conveniently located on the I-10 freeway between the Alabama and Tennessee exits. Bring the kids too and watch them play in the only indoor fun center, High Five Indoor Playground, where parents are welcomed on the playground. Birthday celebrations are encouraged, so make plans for some great fun at the mall. More reasons why the Tri-City Center is called the Mall with a Heart.
And welcome back, friends. You are tuned to NBC Radio, KCAA, 1050 AM, 102.3 FM, 106.5 FM, or you can listen from anywhere around the world, I know some of you do, at kcaaradio.com. This is Viewpoint with Father John, and I'm your host, Father John Reed. And just a reminder, if you do miss an episode, just go to YouTube and in the search, put Viewpoint with Father John, KCAA. My guest this evening is one of my heroes and someone I really enjoy talking with. It's Professor Vanessa Tyson. She's Associate Professor of Politics at Scripps College, the Women's College of Claremont. And I figured out why I keep stuttering when I introduce you. You're so wickedly smart that I get intimidated. And so, when I'm talking to someone who's obviously years ahead of me in IQ, I don't even have a calculator to figure it out. So, so I really appreciate you being here. And,
You're very generous, Father John.
No, I'm just being honest. Joe will tell you, if he looks at two of us, he says, she's a smart one, go with her. And so you're not going to drive the bus this week. But so what are some things you think we should be paying attention to as we're going through this? I mean, we're talking about some of the different problems, but what are some things we should pay attention to that might even lead towards a solution? Is there anything that we can consider?
I mean, I keep going back to what Dr. Fauci said last year about how, I don't know how to make people care for one another. Right?
Yes.
I don't know how to tell people that we're all connected, or how to get them to believe that we're all connected. I mean, I think, and this extends not only to whether we're talking about healthcare and a pandemic, or whether we're talking about climate change, which is, drastically reshaping our world.
Yes.
I don't know how there's such a fantastic climate, and I mean this in a like fantastic, not as in a good sense, but fantastic as like a enormous,
Right.
Climate of distrust in this country. Some of it is distrust in the government, and I can understand some of that, but we need to. I don't think when it comes to climate change or a worldwide pandemic that the distrust needs to be in those arenas. I think that we have to focus on building communities of understanding, trying to engage without losing our patience. And I say that, it's easier said than done. I mean, me, I generally in my daily work try to keep a level head.
Sure.
But it is very hard to deal with these issues, particularly when so many lives are at stake.
Yes.
This is life or death. Climate change is life or death. I don't know if you've read this one book called Merchants of Doubt.
No,
it came out, I think about 10, 12 years ago. And I use it in my environmental policy class, but I also use it in my intro to public policy class because, it's this kind of location of certain scientists who have been very good, are basically hired guns to manufacture doubt, right?
Okay.
There's this repeated trend of saying, well, the results aren't conclusive. We don't know if climate change is real, or we don't know if climate change is happening. We don't know if it's man-made. But it's the same scientists, who disproportionately were saying, we don't know if cigarette smoke is bad for you. We don't know, while, hundreds of thousands of human, Americans who incidentally served in World War II and were sent free cigarettes are addicted and are now dying, and we're dying of cancer.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
And so it's kind of, this misinformation is first kind of worked into the cycle by presenting doubt. Right. We can show a report that shows that it's not conclusive. Okay,
Sure.
fine, but I can show you 99% of all the rest of the reports that are pretty damn conclusive, right? That are right there. But it's that 1% that is, that allows, various entities to say, oh, it's a hoax, right? Climate change isn't real,
Yeah.
right? There's no global warming. Despite all evidence to the contrary, despite over 600,000, Americans dead and more than 4 million worldwide and skyrocketing upward. A new Delta variant that can reproduce itself 1,260 times faster than the Alpha variant did.
Yes.
Right? Like, that's what we're dealing with, right? And the difficulty here is that, that a lack of vaccination is what allows the virus to mutate.
Right.
Right?
And yet these are some of the same people that also believe that microchips are being put into the vaccines and it's going to change DNA. I received a serious email a couple of days ago about this, and the person was really serious. They're sincere, and they're terrified, and they actually said, "Well, I trust you. If you tell me it's safe, I'll take the vaccine." And I went through all the science with them, showing them it is absolutely safe. And so I have received an email this morning saying they went ahead and got vaccinated. I was really thrilled.
I mean, every person, and I hope anyone who's listening who's on the fence, right, like, thinks about it and says, tomorrow I'm going to go get this vaccine, not for me, but for my family.
Yes.
Not for me, but for my community. Not for me, but for all the people, who I don't know,
Yes.
but who, are part of this world I live in. And it's one thing I can do. It's one small thing I can do
Yes.
to help out. And I hope your listeners think about this and contemplate what it means to be part of a community.
Mm.
And it doesn't mean you always have to get along.
Right.
And it doesn't mean you always have to agree.
Exactly.
Right? Like, I hardly agree with anyone. I mean, sometimes I don't even agree with myself from 20 minutes ago.
Yeah.
But that said, right, I hope that your listeners will think, okay, today's the day. Everybody pretty much hates needles. I know.
Yeah.
I effing hate needles. God, like, my family could tell you stories for days. But go get that shot. Go make it happen. Go to the Claremont Pharmacy. Go to whatever pharmacy is near you. Because, we are so incredibly privileged in this country to have access to not one, not two, but 3 phenomenal vaccines that can do that can protect us and protect those we love.
Yes.
And other countries, people are lining up in droves. I have a friend in the Philippines, my beloved friend Norberto, who I've known for years and years, and he happens to be 75, and he was finally able to get his first shot, and I just wanted to cry tears of joy when he told me. And he stood in line for hours and hours in the heat a few days. I mean, this was maybe a week or so ago, because it was raining today in the Philippines.
Oh.
But he stood for everybody, around the world. People are lining up because they can't wait to get this vaccine. They don't want to die. They don't want to lose their families. They don't want to lose their friends and loved ones. They want to live.
Yeah.
And I hope that, your listeners will think about the privilege we have of being in the U.S. And part of it, yes, is that you have a choice in whether or not you get this vaccine. But another part of it is choosing to live and
Yes.
choosing to do your part for the people you love and the people you don't even know yet.
Right. And people you may not even meet that you could spread this to. I think a few years back, if you remember, the measles outbreak that started at Disneyland and other places.
Yep.
And these were by a few people. And I'm sorry, there's some real conspiracy people that put out really bad information. And, the fact that they were trying to say that vaccines caused autism. And I was speaking to a pathologist about that, by the way, and he says, no way.
Yeah, no.
There's no thing. He said, if anything, what his theory is when we do the sonogram, that could be too much power on the baby whose brain is just developing, on the fetus whose brain is just developing. But because someone decided that they were completely anti-vaccine, so they didn't vaccinate their child, and took them to a place like Disneyland. And remember, there was hundreds of people that wound up with measles from this, something that we almost eradicated.
Yep. One of my friends, actually, the cousin of a childhood friend of mine, and the cousin is a friend of mine in her own right, her baby daughter caught the measles.
Oh.
And it was utterly horrifying, in part because, she was only 11 months old when she contracted the measles. And I guess you get your MMR shot, like the measles, mumps, rubella shot at, once you're one.
Right.
But, poor Holly, her daughter, got the measles at 11 months old. And this could have been prevented had
Yes.
it not been for, this anti-vaccine population. And it was touch and go. When babies get the measles, when babies get any disease, this is one of the points in your life where you're most vulnerable.
Mm-hmm.
Holly survived, but
Good.
I remember like a lump in my throat when her mother, sent me a picture of Holly's little body, tiny body, covered in red bumps.
Mm.
You see this in a textbook, in a biology textbook or something like that. I had never seen it on someone I knew.
Yeah.
Someone so small and so helpless.
Yeah, I can remember when I was doing Pete's rotation as a chaplain, and once in a while I'd see something like that, it just rip my heart out because, we're supposed to be able to protect our children, and something like this happens, and nothing can make a parent feel more powerless and guilty, even though it's not their fault, than to have a sick child. And it's heart-wrenching, to say the least.
Yeah.
The fact that these are things that we could prevent, and there's a certain segment in the population that really makes a profit out of these conspiracy theories. Alex Jones and the rest of them, I'm sure I'll get a letter for that, but facts are facts. And their greed drives them to put out this bad information because it brings in viewers and dollars. I don't even have a word beyond evil to describe it. And, I don't call so many people evil, anyone who knows me. But that behavior, I can't categorize it as anything else. And if you look at, the word evil, it's live spelled backwards. And this is anti-life. It really is.
Mm-hmm. It really is. And one thing I would say is, I look at that and I always think about, corruption,
Mm-hmm.
right? In the very simplistic sense of the term, not in terms of political corruption or this or that, but when our morals are corrupted, when our values are corrupted, when our humanity has been corrupted, that this is, part of being a good citizen of the world is to hold those persons who have been corrupted accountable.
Yes.
And sometimes, that corruption often gives them more power.
Mm-hmm.
But that's all the more reason why you have to stand up to that power, no matter how hard it is, no matter what the cost, because at the end of the day, all we've got is our integrity. All we've got is, what we're willing to fight for. And I'm so astounded that, that not getting a vaccine or denying a vaccine, rejecting it, is the sword that these individuals want to fall on.
Right.
That's not the battle
No,
you
it's
want to
not.
have. And good God, if this had happened in polio during,
Yeah,
goodness,
absolutely.
how long is humanity going to last, do you think?
Not too long. Well, there's our music telling us we're at the end of this. But, Professor, I'd sure like to have you back again to continue this conversation, because I think there's much more to still talk about. And I thank you for coming on the show. My guest this evening has been Professor Vanessa Tyson. She is Associate Professor of Politics at Scripps College, the Women's College of Claremont. And if anyone hasn't told you this week that they love you, let me be the first. And we'll be back next week. God bless.
KCAA Loma Linda. Listen on 1050 AM.